Welcome to today's talk. My name is Giacomin, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, innovation. And I'll be making a few observations that arise from when you step back a bit and look at the process and look at some of the issues involved and some of the logic behind bringing some new intuition or some new idea to market. And just making a few observations about things that are worth thinking about a little bit before jumping in to building things, testing things, calculating things to realize the new intuition, the new opportunity, the new concept that's come up. So the first thing to notice is, where do we start from? Usually any sort of product, system, or service design will start from some intuition, some observation, noting some opportunity, noting some problem that existing that could be solved. Usually a person who's doing some form of innovations already thought a bit about the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why, the 5 W's, the canonical classical 5 W's of design. Probably there's a rough idea about the answers to these questions. Certainly the who and the why is usually somewhat clear right from the beginning, from the first observations and intuition. So if we're starting here and we have to move this forward, what kinds of things is it worth thinking a little bit, a few minutes, before jumping in and sketching things up and doing calculations and prototyping and so forth, our design? One thing that's worth giving a little bit of thought to, because it influences the design process, and consistency will make things easier, simpler, cheaper, more efficient. It's worth thinking about what kind of opportunity are we talking about, and what kind of process might be involved in fleshing it out and bringing it forward. Some opportunities are technological in nature. Something's been invented, a material, a chip, a computer algorithm, a neural network, whatever. Something new is available now. It wasn't possibly available before. It might do something useful for people. There's an opportunity there to deliver something and provide something to people which wasn't provided before. So certain opportunities are clearly driven by a newly available technology of some sort. But that's not the only kind of opportunities that designers deal with on a daily basis. Other opportunities might be human-centered in nature. They might be human-centered design issues. People have come to expect something different from that product. People have come to expect something additional from that service. So there's something about people's psychology, sociology, behavior. There's something for people that's been noted. There's an opportunity there. We may wish to take it forward. And that would start from a different motivation, and that would be developed and fleshed out probably with a different process from a technological opportunity. And then, of course, there's also the possibility of designing based on opportunities or problem solvings that come out of the world of environmental and sustainable design. The planet can only take so much. Something that we've been doing for a while needs to stop or be done differently, or some opportunity can be added to do something additional in a different way that's beneficial to the planet. In this case, the processes might start with looking at the ecosystems involved. There might be a lot of biology involved. There might be a lot of calculations of an energetic nature. So it's worth thinking for a few moments about what's the basis of this intuition, this opportunity we've identified. Is it going to be about some technological perfection and making something work very efficiently and well technically? Is it going to be about a human issue that might require ethnography and interacting with people, maybe even co-design to take it forward? Or is this about something of the planetary ecosystem, the planet, the biology, Mother Nature itself? Do we need to understand the chemical or scientific basis, the ecological system involved, and so forth? Each of these innovation bases or these innovation approaches would typically tend to have slightly different methods and steps in their process, different starting points, different processes, and perhaps different tools along the way. So that's one aspect it's worth thinking about for a few minutes before jumping into sketching things up and prototyping things. Another interesting question that becomes evident when you step back and look at the innovation or design process from a certain distance is the question of the nature of the innovation or the opportunity that's being prospected. What are we talking about? Is it something that's an incremental change? Are we improving something or making it better or adding something to something people already know or have some familiarity with? Or are we talking about something that's going to be psychologically, sociologically, societally more disruptive? We did not have anything that could do this until yesterday. Today we can do this, and we can offer something to people and businesses along those lines. And again, it's a question that's worth thinking about a little bit before we jump into things, because if it's more incremental, the nature of our intuition, our opportunity that we are prospecting, perhaps we want to use existing language to explain it. Perhaps we want to look at existing standards and norms. Perhaps we wish to get as much as possible of this design, even at a concept stage, to conform to some of the expectations and some of the practices that are already out there. Instead, if it's disruptive, we may be making a big mistake to conform or to adopt a large number of existing practices, because we may confuse people about the nature of what we're proposing and offering. If the design is something fundamentally new, it may need a new name, it may need a new explanation, it may need new functionalities, it may need to adopt new technologies, new materials. If it's new, it might be that it'll be easier to come to grips with, to understand, for people to get their head around it, if everything is consistent and new, rather than looking somewhat or behaving somewhat like existing practice. So there's a question of, is this more incremental? Is it more disruptive? Of course, most design activities will probably be a mix of these two characteristics, but weighing in, it may be obvious that we're more to one side or the other, and that affects the design process going forward and some of the design choices we'll be making. And being aware of that and cognizant of that from the beginning may simplify the design process. Another aspect which is incredibly important to consider for a design is the time frame. Quite often we'll jump into things and start making things and sketching things and talking to potential customers. But if we stop for a second and take a look at the design brief, a very important constraint or characteristic is going to be the time scale of the project. If something is going to be delivered to people, to market, within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that's a fairly short time scale. That would typically be somewhat incremental, no matter how revolutionary some aspect may be. There'll be a lot of incremental characteristics, and that sort of design would benefit from a lot of ethnography, customer journeys, persona scenarios, all the typical tools of UX, user interaction design, would probably prove beneficial, because we're leveraging a lot of what people already know and what they already do and what they wish at the current time to be doing. Instead, if we're talking about deliveries on the 4 to 5 year scale, or 10 years, or high-speed rail line in 20 years' time, how do we know that the people who will be getting on the train 20 years from now will be eating the same foods they do today, carrying the same digital devices they're carrying today, wearing the same clothes? Will their body shapes be the same as people on average today? So there'll be a lot about the people themselves, their lifestyle, and the artifacts they surround themselves with, which may need to be considered, because they may change. over the time interval of the design process. So for more speculative design processes with longer time scales, we may be looking at scenarios and prototypes. They may be helpful or they may not. Certainly science fiction prototypes, design fictions, and various speculative design approaches will probably have a role, and they'll probably prove beneficial for fleshing things out and considering how much certain things could change over that time interval before the thing comes to the people or comes to market. And once we've clarified the who, what, where, when, and why, once we've given a little bit of thought to whether this is a more technological, human-centered, or sustainable-driven process, once we've even nailed, as it were, and fixed clearly in our mind the effects of the time scale, then there's, of course, a question. Every business, every person will have a preferred set of tools they work with. Every designer, every design team, every design organization, every large industry will have their preferred software tools, their preferred computer systems, their preferred anthropometric databases. So it is worth considering before we jump in and start sketching and calculating and talking to people and getting things moving. It is worth taking a few minutes and just giving some thought to what effects our tools might have and how the tools we specifically favor and we plan to use, how they might affect the outcome. For example, an anthropometric database or a CAD system or a finite element program or a neural network, which is the one we've adopted within our organization, will have certain characteristics, and it'll do certain things very well and certain other things a little bit less well. How might that affect our process, and do any of the constraints or limitations touch upon areas which are quite important to this specific project and this specific design? And there's also a very important question growing in importance every day, every year. It's more and more an issue in design settings, which is what's the general approach to the innovation? Are we talking about specialist design, maybe a single designer, design team, or a small organization leading the project? Or are we talking right from the very beginning about co-design, about working with the public, working with the people, possibly working with local agencies, government agencies, NGOs? Are we going to be getting lots of useful information and taking on board lots of useful requests and requirements from certain stakeholders by involving them from the very beginning and having them as part of the design process? Or is that not necessary for this specific intuition, this specific concept, this opportunity that we're currently developing? That's a big question. And of course, there's also these days a growing usefulness, a growing tendency towards co-creation. Not only do we wish to bring on board the stakeholders, not only do we wish to involve them to extract information, identify requirements, identify preferences, but it'd be nice if they pay for things as well along the way. So co-creation, we may bring in people and organizations who are financing, who are shaping the business model. Possibly we want the customers to purchase this new opportunity before it's available, before it's actually prototype tested and on the market. Perhaps we want them to pay for it a year before so that we can use those funds to flesh out the design. So the innovation approach, is it specialist driven? Is it co-designing? Is it co-creation, bringing in the stakeholders as business partners to some degree, in some ways, in some areas? That's another consideration. It's quite interesting, and it's worth thinking about a few minutes before we jump into things. And then there's the question of what kind of innovation, what kind of result would we expect from this process with these people, with these tools, with these finance methods, and with this whole philosophy and logic we're taking forward of being either technologically driven, human-centered, or sustainable. The innovators themselves, the people, the processes, the organizations, the stakeholders, they'll be of certain types. And as Manzini has suggested some years back with this very helpful summary diagram. There's organizations, teams, and philosophies of design which will tend more towards problem solving. There's others that will tend more towards making sense of things, creating new things, expanding the product or service spectrum with new expectations, new ideas. There'll be certain teams and tools and organizations which will be more about diffuse design, bringing in all the stakeholders and working together. Others will be a design team, very limited in number, very specific in its skills, and very specific in its aims and objectives. So we will have different types of design processes and design teams. We'll have some that you would describe as a design and communication agency, some that are more better described as cultural activists or grassroots organizations. There will be a variety of philosophies and approaches and objectives which can be described. And depending on which one we see ourselves working in, based on the nature of the intuition, the tools and the teams and the philosophy involved, you'd expect different results at the end. And it's worth noting those and thinking about it a little bit before you jump into things, because there's no point working against the nature of the process. So thank you very much for your time and your patience. I hope that a few of these big picture overview, stepping back type observations might be of some help. Personally, I consider them to be worth thinking about a little bit for a few minutes before jumping into things, because many of these considerations not just shape the final outcome of the design project, but to some degree, in many aspects, they predetermine the nature of the final result you're going to find on the table, on the computer, in shops at the end of the process. So thank you very much. Speak with you again on the next occasion.